Welcome in, everyone, to our Saturday night post-game show here at the Voice of College Football. I got to say, I thoroughly enjoyed the action on Saturday. It was a great day of college football. I enjoyed it. There were really no crazy upsets by any stretch. I can't even think of any upsets. We'll check the scoreboard. Maybe I'll be wrong. I don't remember seeing any upsets. Any real upsets, maybe by 2 or 3 points, something like that, but no real upsets on this day. But it was just an enjoyable day of college football. And of course, there was a near upset in Columbus that would have been cataclysmic for Ohio State and the Big Ten at the top of the Big Ten. But that did not occur. And we will run through the scores. We have left the link there in the chat, so please give us a call as we will go through the day in college football. Just posted Penn State, Wisconsin analysis. Check it out. Just posted a video on LSU and Texas A&M as well. Please check out that video. Wow, that was the game that will probably leave the most impression on me on this night. A night in which I didn't have enough screens to watch all the games I wanted to see. I did see a lot of Michigan State. Spartans looked good early. Michigan controlled the game and came back and won 24-17. They did have a 2-touchdown lead. I didn't see the end of the game to see if Michigan State had a shot to tie the game, but it was 24-17 final. We will have much to say about that game. And of course, we've got our Michigan show going on over on the Wolverines channel. So if you're into Michigan football, please leave me. Check out the crew on the Michigan channel with the Michigan State post game. And again, we're going to get into LSU-Texas A&M because that game, enormous, the most important game in college football on this day. What happened in Columbus earlier today, which could bode not so well for the Buckeyes going forward, but they squeaked by Nebraska. We had other important games with BYU knocking off UCF and other games in the Big 12 involving West Virginia, Arizona in particular, Kansas State tonight. And we will make our way across the country. So let's get to it. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. The most important thing I will say tonight will be the Amazon link is in the description section of all the videos, including this one. Please, when you shop on Amazon, use the link that we provide. Let's go to the scoreboard. Still in action, just starting the third quarter. So this game's going to be on for a long time. And this is the crap that comes up on ESPN now. I don't know if this has happened to you, but I would just say in the last month, probably half the time that I go to the scoreboard on ESPN, this stupid AT&T message comes up. I have no idea what it is. And I've said this to other people, and they say that they get the same thing. So, apparently those clowns at ESPN don't know what they're doing. So we're going to have to check out another scoreboard. And we will. Let's go to CBS Sports. I want to see all the scores, although we can't see them that well. But here we go. Smaller font. All right, so we've got the aforementioned Cincinnati-Colorado game. Buffs lead at 24-14. They just started the second half. Hopefully that's still going to be on when we get done here. Hawaii leads Nevada. That game will be on, believe me, unless people are throwing me $1,000 super chats. That game will be going on when we get done. Hawaii leads 7-0 over the Wolfpack. Where are you, Neil Campbell? Halftime, San Diego State and Washington State. Cougars lead 14-12. Buffalo lost at Ohio U 47-16. Charlotte, Memphis 33-28. Tigers. Virginia Tech beat Georgia Tech 21-6. Hokies now 5-3. Tech at 5-4. There's the Ohio State game. They got by Nebraska with a late touchdown, 21-17. Notre Dame throttled Navy. I was going to post an instant analysis on that game. I watched it until it got completely out of hand. And for as well as Notre Dame played, Navy is just, they're not a good football team for the level of play that we are expecting out of playoff teams. They are not that team. Okay, Navy's an excellent group of young men, of course, and we honor them and recognize their accomplishments and what they do for us in terms of our country. But in terms of fielding a football team that is going to compete against the elite in the country, no, sir. No. And they gave away that game with a number of fumbles that were not caused by Notre Dame, were just gifted to them. So I don't know how much that says about Notre Dame, but they did win 51-14. Ole Miss and Oklahoma. Check out our post-game show with Leanne Herring as Ole Miss defeated Oklahoma 26-14 to keep alive their playoff hopes. Tulane beat North Texas 45-37. North Carolina woke up. They finally won a game in the ACC. They dismantled Virginia today 41-14. Amari Hampton had 105 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. Okay, Indiana without Curtis Rourke and with Taven Jackson at quarterback, still way too much for Washington, 31-17. Impressive showing considering what Indiana did to Nebraska last week. Lost their quarterback, did not get shaken by that. The second string quarterback, Taven Jackson, used to be their starter, so he has much experience, and they looked the part. Indiana continues to look the part. Arkansas scored 1 million points against Mississippi State. They won 58-25. They take on Ole Miss next week. Georgia State, App State, and App State wins at 33-26. Central Michigan and Miami of Ohio, Red Hawks 46-7. Temple and East Carolina Pirates win at 56-34. And they just let go of their coach here in the last week. Bowling Green over Toledo 41-26. There's the game that I had mentioned earlier. BYU was a 2.5-point dog on the road at UCF. Why? I don't know. I thought maybe Vegas knew something we did not. In this case, they did not. BYU won it easily, 37-24, and they are still undefeated. So we've got to start taking BYU seriously in a Big 12 way. Akron 25-21 over Eastern Michigan. Illinois, I thought, might put up a fight at Oregon. Oregon right now has to be considered by far decidedly the best team in the Big Ten. I have not said that in the past. I will say it now. 38-9 over Illinois. Maryland, Minnesota. All you PJ Fleck haters, understand that Minnesota has been a really good team over the last month. 48-23. The Gophers now 5-3. Western Michigan defeated Kent State 52-21. Bama completely throttled a Brady Cook team 34-0. I guess he started the game. I did not see one play of this game, but Brady Cook started, had to leave very early in this game, and Drew Pine was overwhelmed, and Bama completely crushed a Missouri team that should have never been ranked. I did not rank them, have not had them ranked for quite some time. I have not had them ranked actually the entire season. They should not have been ranked. Again, that's the AP doing us a disservice. Ball State over Northern Illinois 25-23. Iowa ran away from Northwestern in the second half, and Brendan Sullivan came into the game. Maybe they will actually start him at quarterback because that is the right decision. Check out my instant analysis video on Iowa and Northwestern, even though the season is over. If all you are into are the playoffs and the national championship, yes, the season is over for Iowa, but there are a couple reasons to follow the Hawkeyes, and I outlined those. Baylor defeated Oklahoma State 38-28. Barn burner in Tulsa. Golden Hurricane defeated UTSA 46-45. UConn over Rice 17-10. The Fighting Jim Moras are 5-3. Quite a game at TCU as TCU held off Texas Tech 35-34. Josh Hoover threw for 344 and 3 touchdowns. Southern Miss loses to James Madison 32-15. UMass, a winner, 35-7 over Wagner. Wake Forest, too much for Stanford, 27-24 on the coast. We've got Cal bludgeoning Oregon State, 44-7. Texas got by Vandy. I posted an instant analysis video there. Vandy is legitimately a good football team. They just flat out are. They're a good team. They are one of the 20 best teams in the country. Texas won 27-24. South Alabama over ULM, 46-17. New Mexico and Colorado State, the Rams win it 17-6. Miami, way too much for Florida State, 36-14. I did not waste my time watching that game. Damian Martinez had a huge game, 148 yards and 2 touchdowns. I did see about 5 plays. Troy and Arkansas State. ASU wins 34-31. Utah State and Wyoming give the win to the Aggies, 27-25. Utah and Houston. This is how far Utah has pummeled down the ranks. They lose at Houston, 17-14, and the Utes are 4-4. We were looking at their schedule preseason, thinking a lot of people that they would go 11-1 and only have one loss because they would trip up against somebody. West Virginia gets out to a big lead and holds off Arizona 31-26. There's the game of the night. Texas A&M defeats LSU 38-23. Penn State over Wisconsin 28-13. We talked about that, as well as Michigan over Michigan State 24-17. All the has-beens in the SEC getting together tonight in Lexington as Kentucky defeated Auburn. No, that's Auburn over Kentucky, 24-10. Look at that. Kansas State pulled out one against Kansas, 29-27. And K-State still only has one loss in the Big 12. Huge game. This was an enormous game in the ACC tonight, as SMU stayed undefeated in the conference. Duke had only one loss in the conference. They could have made a huge statement with a win. They came back to tie it up, but lost in overtime, 28-27. There you see Fresno State over San Jose State, 33-10. And then we will not go through the scores on Thursday and Friday. Let's get to it right here at the Voice of College Football. We got Rob on the line.
Hey, Mark. How's it going?
It is going just fine. How are you?
I was getting a little nervous for you there with Ohio State. I don't know what's going on with them. I know that you prefer when people don't know that you're an Ohio State fan, but what are your thoughts as a fan of the job that Ryan Day is doing with the Buckeyes right now?
Well, I'll be able to answer that question obviously better at the end of the season, because all sorts of championship teams struggle at times. It's a situation where they're working with a third string left tackle, so that's an issue. Sometimes you can lose one player and that can really muck up an offense, and that's what happened today. Now, I'm not going to excuse, really, Nebraska played an excellent defensive scheme on Ohio State, but man, if you just watched the left tackle over the course of especially the first half, you saw all that you needed to see out of Ohio State's offense. They couldn't operate their offense on probably half the plays because the left tackle was thrown into Will Howard's lap or one of the running backs' laps. So I don't know what kind of coaching you can do to remedy that. We knew that they didn't have as deep an offensive line as they would have hoped going into this season. But yeah, I'm not. I am concerned. They obviously can't play like this. They will not even make it out of the Big Ten, let alone make any kind of run in the college football playoff playing like this. But we see what Oregon's doing. They look like the best team in the country right now. And Ohio State, again, this is one game, just their previous game. Obviously, they could have kicked a field goal and beat Oregon. So I'm not going to go that crazy. We can go through year after year after year after year of Ohio State teams that finished in the top 5 in the country and had a few games like this during the season. But they have serious issues along the offensive line. Other than that, if they would have been playing a good offense, then I would have been proud of the defensive effort. But Nebraska hasn't played well on offense against virtually anyone. So I really can't categorize the defensive effort as being anything outstanding, although they did take over the game in the final quarter. Will Howard's fine. He's a good quarterback. He's better than I thought he was going to be. The receivers are phenomenal. They have the best wide receiver core in the nation. They have two of the best. They probably have the best tandem of running backs in the country. But when the offensive line doesn't work, that shows us how useless some skill position players can be when the offensive line is not doing its job.
Yeah, I think that's what worries me the most for Ohio State right now is that they obviously have, the tools in the box to do some damage offensively, but we just haven't seen that whole package come together yet. And I really thought that, the Oregon game, I thought Ohio State was going to win. I just thought that they had the roster and the talent to do it. And even after Oregon won, I'm like, well, I still don't know who the best team is. I think Ohio State beats them on a neutral field or at the horseshoe. That's what I thought at the time. But as you just said, I think it's pretty much undisputed now that Oregon, they just keep handling business and doing it pretty convincingly. I mean, beating Illinois 38-9 is pretty impressive. It's more impressive than I think some people realize. Oregon just looks like the best team in the Big Ten, and Ohio State's got a lot of work to do if they want to, get that back.
I thought of you today, Rob, because you, during our conversation yesterday, said that you would like Notre Dame to discontinue the series with Navy. Well, I was watching the Notre Dame Navy game, and they were explaining, because I'm sure I've heard this story probably 30 years ago, but forgot it, the reason why Notre Dame and Navy play every year.
Yeah, it was kind of a mutual thing. Actually, I believe what happened is Navy gave money to Notre Dame, who was struggling at the time, and Notre Dame gave men and campus they let them stay at the campus at Notre Dame because Navy was fighting the war. So it was kind of this mutual thing. But in a lot of ways, Navy helped Notre Dame. I think some people look at it as Navy helped Notre Dame more than Notre Dame helped Navy. But it is it's a nice story, and I have a lot of respect for Navy and all the service academies. For me, it's just, as I said, it's already you're seeing people saying, well, because people were talking about how good Navy was, or they're doing so well, and they're scoring 44 points a game, and they're blowing everybody up, and they gave Memphis the only loss because they were undefeated at the time, and so everyone's like glazing Navy, and then as soon as Notre Dame beats them, they're like, Navy sucks, and it's like I said, it's one of those lose situations where you get no credit for beating Navy, but if they beat you, and Navy's not like, I'm not going to sit here and say Navy's like a world beater, but they're not an easy team to stop defensively because they have so many trick plays and unique looks, and they're not easy to game plan for. Hell, a lot of people on that Notre Dame defense probably haven't ever seen that type of offense before because it's just not really played anymore in high school. So there's a couple veterans on that team, obviously, that are like Jack Kaiser. He's seen that Navy, not exactly that Navy team before, but he's seen that style of defense or offense. So it's good that you got a leader like Jack Kaiser, who's not the most athletic guy on the team, but he gets everybody in position. He's kind of like the quarterback for the defense in a lot of ways. And I think that having that kind of steady leadership helps when you're playing a team like Navy. And, it was a good win for Notre Dame, but like I said, they're not going to get a lot of credit. I think the funny thing to me is I believe Notre Dame's going to get more credit for A&M beating LSU than they are for beating Navy. It's kind of funny how that works, but.
Yeah, so I wish I would have taken in the full explanation of this during the broadcast, because I heard that and saw the description, and they showed the Notre Dame president at the time, and I thought, okay, Rob called about this last night, and here we go. So I'm looking at it right now. It says the U.S. Navy made Notre Dame a training center for V-12 candidates, as you just said, and paid enough for usage of the facilities. And the way it was described during the broadcast is that Notre Dame was in huge financial difficulty, and
Yes,
this
yes,
helped them severely.
it
And
did. Yeah,
so after the Notre Dame president said, well, because they've done this for us, we will play them in football for as long as they want us to play them in football. Then I thought, well, there's the answer to your question right there, that they gave them their word that they would forever play them in football as long as Navy wants to play football.
right. Yeah, I know it's a selfish thing, Mark. It's it's more for me than the team. I don't think they're going to drop the Navy game, and I don't think Navy probably wants to drop the Notre Dame game. But it's fine. I was actually just glad to see that they were calling chop blocks for once. That first call, I was like, thank God. Maybe they're not going to get away with it all game this time.
Yeah, I didn't really notice that, but just to add to what you were saying about how difficult it is to play Navy, even more so now because they can actually throw the ball downfield. They actually have a serviceable passing attack,
Yeah,
unlike any other time in our lifetime since
yeah,
Roger Staubach.
yeah. And like I said, Navy's not a world beater, but they're not easy to game plan for. And I wish the best for Navy. I hope they go and keep steamrolling the rest of their opponents. I just didn't want them to steamroll Notre Dame, obviously. But yeah, Notre Dame's got to see defense travels, Mark, and people don't realize Notre Dame has a top 5 scoring defense in the country. I mean, they're giving up. Well, after this Navy game, they're going to be giving up like a little bit over 12 points a game, but that's certainly a defense that can win you most of your games. If you're only giving up 12 points a game, you should, in theory, win pretty much every game. And Notre Dame, as we know, they have a pretty favorable schedule, but yeah, what's more interesting to me is Texas A&M with beating LSU now. Texas A&M has a very, I want to say, easy path to going undefeated for the rest of the year until perhaps that Texas game at the end. But I mean, they got South Carolina, NM State, and Auburn before Texas. So those are 3 games that Texas A&M should win. I mean, they're looking like a playoff lock at this point, or at least certainly a very favorable pick for the playoffs. So I didn't expect that after the week 1 win that Notre Dame got on them. So pretty interesting. There was a lot of interesting games this week, actually. I think Colorado, yeah, they're kind of clobbering Cincinnati right now, so that's not as interesting as I hoped it would be. But yeah, I don't know what to make of Texas. They squeaked by Vanderbilt, and I know you said Vanderbilt's a pretty good team, and I'm not saying they're not, but Vanderbilt lost to Georgia State and Missouri, who just got their clocks cleaned by Alabama. I think Vanderbilt's a pretty decent team that can potentially. I think they're kind of a little bit like Navy in a sense that they're hard to game plan for with their offense.
Well, I've seen enough of Vandy and seen enough results to think that they're one of the 20 best teams in the country.
That I agree. Yeah, I'm not saying they're a bad team. I think they're top. Like they're not like great. They're not like world beaters. But I think what gives Vandy that sneaky ability to be there is just like I said. They're kind of hard to game plan for. Their quarterback is just he's a maestro with the football. Pavia, it's a fun team to watch. I'll say that. I mean, this is the most interesting Vanderbilt has been in a long time. I still think Texas, after having seen the last several games that Texas has put out there, and again with the benefit of hindsight, seeing what Oklahoma is and seeing what Michigan is this year, I severely, like a lot of people, I think overrated Texas. So I'm not surprised that they kind of squeaked by Vanderbilt. But I just think this is not so much a knock on Vanderbilt or Texas, but I think this week and the last couple weeks are a kind of just a showing of the parity that we're seeing in college football this year, and I'm really enjoying it. Like I think this is probably, and you hear this, the last couple of years. Oh, this is the first year where anybody can beat anybody. Well, I think that this year actually is that. I think almost anybody in the top 15 could beat almost anybody on any given night. The way that the way that this year has panned out.
Well, I would not argue with that because I think we've seen that out of everyone. We haven't seen one team that has looked invincible every week.
Well,
Oregon's had its Boise State, Georgia's had its Alabama and Kentucky, Ohio State's had its Nebraska. Everybody has had a weak game, if not more.
except for one team, Mark. You know who that is? Windiana.
BYU? Oh, Indiana. Except for Indiana. Yes, except for Indiana.
You know they haven't trailed this year at any point?
I saw that on the bottom line. They're the first team in forever that has not trailed through 8 games.
What a story. What a story. I hope, you know what's funny? Indiana has enough money. They have so much money from their alumni and the fact that they've had this, you know, traditional powerhouse basketball team, not so much lately, but they have a lot of money. So if they want to, like, Signetti doesn't have to go anywhere. Like, nobody can really buy him out. Like, Indiana can pretty much match any other offer from any other college if they want.
Yes.
It's going to be interesting. I hope he stays. I hope he builds a program there with Indiana, because this has been, to me, this is like the story of the college football season, is just Indiana coming out of nowhere and just blowing everybody up. And the fact that I think a lot of people don't realize, Indiana's defense is actually pretty good. Like, they're a very good defense. They're disciplined. It's a fun team to watch. I don't know. Like, somebody said in chat earlier that they think Ohio State's going to blow out Indiana, and I'm not so sure. I'd be a little bit nervous if I was Ohio State, because Indiana is looking pretty scary right now.
I'm seeing comments in the chat that Indiana would pummel Ohio State, but we don't need to conjecture about that because they're going to play.
Exactly.
They're going to play, and maybe Indiana will pummel Ohio State. Maybe they will.
Yeah, I have no idea. I wouldn't touch that game with a 10-foot pole. I'm not betting either way on that.
Well, you may want to bet on Indiana's side because the Ohio State's still going to be a 2-touchdown favorite in that game.
Right. Well, the funny thing is, if you asked anybody before the season started, hey, Ohio State versus Indiana this year, who do you got? Like, no one's picking Indiana. And now that the fact that they've played so well that you kind of got to think about it, that's just the kind of year this has been, Mark.
Yeah, again, I'm reserving judgment on this topsy-turvy season.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not quite sold on it. I still see Oregon. I still see Ohio State in good shape, at least, meaning not based on what we're seeing on the field in terms of their performance, based on the records. They're still winning the games. Still seeing Georgia there. Still seeing Texas there. Alabama to a certain extent. I'm still seeing all the players in position.
Yeah, I think personally that Oregon and Georgia are the top 2 teams in college football right now. That's my opinion. I could be wrong. I've been wrong many times this season, but I think those 2 teams to me are the teams that I wouldn't want to play in the first round. Well, I just think they're the most solid teams, and that they can beat anybody and are probably more likely to beat anybody that's put in front of them. I think there's other teams that can certainly hang with with anybody or possibly beat anybody, but I think Oregon and Georgia are the ones that are probably the most likely to beat the opponents on their plate.
Well, you're making me feel better about Ohio State, because if Ohio State was able to go out to Oregon, difficult place to play, and again, they had just about everything go wrong on that final drive to not win the game. They would have won the game. They were in field goal range. Then I'm feeling okay. Other than they've got a different offensive line situation, and they're really going to have to piecemeal that. And that's one place you don't want to be. I'd rather have Ohio State missing their 2 top wide receivers. I'd rather have them miss both running backs. They could play their 3rd and 4th string running backs and be okay. I would rather have injuries anywhere else besides an offensive line.
No, trust me, I get it. I mean, that the line. I mean, football is you can have all the bells and whistles and pretty receivers and running backs and skill positions, but if you don't have the line play on both offense and defensive line, I mean, just look at Michigan last year. They weren't pretty. They had a good quarterback, but he wasn't playing in a style that made him shine. They had some good players, had some decent receivers, but they won last year because they had the line. They had the offensive line, the defensive line. They were strong. They bullied people. So yeah, if you don't have the line played to match the rest of your team, you're not gonna win a whole lot. And that's just how college football and the NFL is played as well. So no,
Well,
I think
consider this. I was just going to say, consider this, Rob. I just read all the scores. I don't think there was an upset today.
yeah, I don't really think so. I was kind of hoping for um uh, Colorado to maybe bite it or somebody, just make it interesting. It doesn't have to be Colorado, but I was kind of hoping for any kind of upset. But pretty much, yeah, everybody that was supposed to win or was favored to win. Technically, LSU was the higher ranked team, but A&M, was that they had the points, so
That
they
was,
were
that
the
was yeah.
they were the favorite
Either
for
team could have
Vegas.
won, and I would
Yeah.
not have considered that an upset. It's just a pick 'em game to
Hmm.
me. Technically, BYU upset UCF. Technically, I don't consider that an upset.
Right. No. Well, yeah, I know. I think Ohio State's pretty safe. I mean, look, if your worst game of the year is beating Nebraska, because I mean, you'd rather have that be your worst game of the year than losing to NIU. Let's put it that way. And I'm very happy with the way Notre Dame has played since that loss. They've basically blown everybody out, and they're just getting better. Riley Leonard, he he keeps defying what I think he's going to do. He's played a little bit better pretty much every game. So we'll see. We'll see what. I mean, it was good to see Mitchell Evans come back into the fold in this game and get a couple catches. I mean, he's looking. If they can get him back and get him playing like he was last year, that'll be another weapon for them. But yeah, Ohio State. If your worst performance is a squeaky win over Nebraska, I mean that game against Oregon, I don't look at that as like a bad thing for Ohio State because what they dropped 1 or 2 points in the AP after that. Um, I mean, everybody knew that was like a top 3 matchup. So there's plenty of room for Ohio State to bounce back in this thing and still win the Big Ten. I mean, they just got to get some things right, and like you said, that offensive line has to come together. But yeah, really enjoyable, real enjoyable weekend for football. So I'll let you go, Mark. I know you got a bunch of other callers waiting. So
Thanks, Rob. I
yep, no
appreciate it.
problem.
Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
And I never thought I would say this, but in a sense, when Rob mentions bouncing back and getting back into the thick of things in the Big Ten, in a sense, who cares? Who cares if you win the Big Ten? Who cares if you win the SEC? Who cares? Does it matter? Look at Texas A&M situation. So they now lead the SEC. They're the only undefeated team in the SEC. However, they do have an out-of-conference loss. They do play Texas last. Let's say they lose to Texas. They've got 2 losses. They go to the SEC championship game. Maybe they play Texas again. We could have one of those dreaded back-to-back situations where 2 teams play, which we never had when we had divisions, of course, because teams were playing at the end of the season against their own division. So we never had that situation before. But now we could have Texas A&M playing on Thanksgiving weekend, and then in the SEC championship game. And think about it: if Texas A&M loses both to Texas and whomever they would play in the SEC championship game, they would have 3 losses. Would that knock them out? I saw an interesting stat this week that although it's highly unlikely, there is a possibility that Kansas State and Iowa State could play 4 consecutive times. Did you see this? So Kansas State and Iowa State apparently play the final game of the season. Then they could play in the Big 12 championship game. Then there is a scenario in which, let's say it was a 3-6 matchup that they could play in the playoff in the first round. Well, it would be the second round. So it would be the first game for the winner of the Big 12. And then they're playing the opener next year. They are playing in week 1. Kansas State and Iowa State could play 4 consecutive times. The odds are minuscule, of course. And I agree with Rob that if we started the CFP this week, that Georgia and Oregon would be the 2 teams that I would consider to be the best teams and to be most surefire shots to go to the national championship game. All right, welcome into the Voice of College Football. We got Dr. C on the line. Hello, Dr. C.
Hey, Mark. Hey, sorry about that. Doing well. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good.
Yeah, you know what? What I was going to talk about, the last caller made most of my main points, and that was in regards to, have we been sleeping on A&M?
Have we been sleeping on A&M? This doesn't surprise me too much. I think I picked them 9-3. They lost to Notre Dame. I did pick them to win this game tonight. I'm trying to think other games I've picked them to lose. I don't know that I have. So it's not really surprising me. I thought it was very entertaining the way in which the game went, that you had LSU in control of the game, but didn't extend the lead as much as they should have. They missed 2 field goals in the first half. They kicked a field goal when they had a long drive in which they just ripped right down the field for 87 yards and settled for a field goal. Then they missed a field goal in which the holder and the snapper were not on the same page, and the holder just had the ball hit him in the chest. So they missed 3 field goals and left a lot of points on the field. And then Texas A&M, of course, inserts the backup quarterback, and they're off and running, and Garrett Nussmeier just starts throwing the ball all over the field to the wrong jerseys, and you had this just monumental momentum swing. I was very close to, I was watching this first half, and actually my playoff prediction came into my head thinking, oh, LSU's leading this game. And even though I picked Texas A&M, I did pick LSU to go to the playoff at the beginning of the year. And I was very much on the border, on the line between Texas A&M and LSU going to the playoff. So it's not really surprising me.
Yeah,
I guess so. Some people.
Yeah, I thought LSU was going to pull this one off. But I actually went to the Missouri A&M game a couple weeks ago. I got third row center field for $90. Unheard of. Because A&M tickets usually run about $500 in that middle section. In fact, for the Texas game, I think they're at $1,800. And I've seen them up to $2,300. That's the one game I see them potentially losing. I think, South Carolina, obviously New Mexico State and Auburn. I think those are givens. South Carolina is not bad, but I think they get that. If A&M loses to Texas, do they still have a chance? They've only got 1 loss in the SEC. They'd be a playoff team, correct? Or does the SEC championship, let's say they lose there, does that affect them?
Well, everything affects everyone. So I don't know if you were listening right before I took your call. I said that exact thing. I said, well, Texas A&M has 1 loss. They play Texas to finish the season. Even if they lose that game, it's their only 1 non-conference or conference loss. They go to the SEC championship game. They lose. They get 3 losses. 3 losses probably eliminates almost anyone out of the playoff. Probably.
3 losses, but only 1 conference loss?
1 in-season conference
would it count
loss.
as 2?
It doesn't matter. is the point. It doesn't
Got
matter
it.
how you count the losses. That's not what the playoff committee cares about. They are just evaluating teams' records and opponents. Like Baylor and Utah played a non-conference game this year. The committee doesn't care what it counts as.
So in essence, does the Big Ten have a leg up on the rest of the conferences in regards to, well, no, they're playing a championship as well. ACC as well. What was it? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a sour deal for A&M, isn't it?
Why?
Because if you go undefeated and you have let's say they have a close game with Texas and lose by a field goal, they go to the SEC championship and let's say they lose their close game as well, and they're out of the playoff.
Probably out of the playoff.
Yeah.
There's no way for us to know this unless somebody would lay out a complete scenario with all the teams involved. We don't know that 10-3 would take them out of the playoff. Maybe, maybe not. No three-loss teams would have made the playoffs in the last 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was seeing. But a heck of a job by Elko. And last thing, I'll let you go. So Elko went to Duke and won, where no one wins at Duke, right? I know Cutcliffe did a couple of times, but it's really hard to win at Duke.
Sure. Yep.
Vandy's coach.
Yeah.
Do you think he sticks around, or do you feel like someone might get him?
That's a great call right there. That's an interesting one. I would think that Clark Lee is moving up all sorts of coaching lists of anyone who needs a coach at the end of this season. Boy, I got to think he is going to be highly sought after.
I would think so. I wonder how big it's hard to say as far as how big his loyalty is to Vanderbilt, right? He just got there, basically.
Yeah, this is his.
But that guy has to be on the top of the list. Yeah.
Yeah, he and
he's done obviously a heck of a job. Yes. If you had to bet, who do you think leaves first, I guess?
Well, our previous caller, Rob, brought up Kurt Signetti and that Indiana would have a chance at keeping him. We tend to think of the hierarchy of these schools, and understandably so, based on their history and their brand. But if you're just looking at dollars and cents, Indiana makes more television revenue as being part of the Big Ten than anybody in the country that's not in the Big Ten. So we shouldn't give Indiana some kind of excuse that their coaches can just be poached from them, that they're poor Indiana and they don't have any money. No, they're making more money than Alabama is in TV revenue. So why couldn't they keep their coach?
That's really fascinating. But at the same time, let's say one of the job that I think is obviously coveted, I guess, but it hasn't been as Florida, right?
Yeah.
If Florida comes to call in, one, I think Florida would dish out more money to pay a coach than Indiana's my guess. And two, recruiting, right, is just a lot easier to recruit Florida than it is Indiana.
Yes and yes. If past history is any indication as to whether Florida is going to pay a coach more than Indiana, absolutely they will. And does Florida have better recruiting ties? Of course, yes. Yes and yes. But I just don't know what the excuse for Indiana and some of these other schools in the Big Ten would be when they already have a television contract that is larger, very slightly larger than the SEC, and it's going to become, starting this season, or whenever that break in the contract that Kevin Warren negotiated kicks in, is going to be decidedly more than the SEC. So when we evaluate how much in Indiana or Northwestern or somebody else in the Big Ten, Rutgers is paying its head coach, it's not that they don't have the capability to pay more. Now, of course, there are other facets to revenue, like the gate and merchandise and other things, but TV is the number one in media rights, the number one factor.
Absolutely. I mean, right now Napier is getting paid a little bit more than $7 million a year. I'm pretty sure this. Obviously, I don't think Indiana could have predicted the success of Signetti. I'm sure he's getting paid a lot less.
I'm going to guess 5. That would be my guess.
But it always seems like a school like Florida is willing to dish out that kind of dough. And I don't know why. I feel like a school like Indiana, obviously, they've just had a great season this year. It seems like a lot of times they're not willing to make those contracts, right?
They haven't been in the past.
Yeah.
Curt Signetti has a 6-year
and I'm not sure
contract.
Why. I think
it pays $27 million, so that's 4.7 per year.
Yeah. So it's right now Napier's making about close to twice, not quite. He's a guy or someone like him, it'd be a similar contract in many ways. To take someone out of there, right?
I think we're losing you. You're cutting out.
Yeah, no, that I was saying is.
Okay. All right, Dr. C, we appreciate you being here. Thanks for calling, as always. Let's keep moving. We got the real MVP on the line. Closer. Now we've got a little switch there. Okay. There we go.
Oh, hello,
now we got
Mark.
the real MVP. We've got
It's
boxes
going good.
that are moving on me. So when I click on them, they become somebody else. How you doing tonight?
It's going well. How about you?
I am doing just fine.
Mark, I'm in the search of a head coach. If you know where I could find one of these things called a coach that actually knows what he's doing, I've been looking out for one. My coach is completely lost. We're in desperation mode. We're benching our quarterback for somebody else who can't really throw the football.
Oh, they made that switch. Okay. They went with the Rutgers kid that, is a running back.
Yeah, we're in complete shambles. We're probably the worst team in the SEC. Maybe Mississippi State's better than us.
Maybe.
Maybe. I mean, it's bad, Mark. It is real bad. I didn't think Stoops would possibly get fired at the beginning of the year, but this is the third straight year of a disappointing season. So in my opinion, it's just, time to move on. It's not because he's horrible coach or anything. It's just gotten stale. And sometimes when things get stale in life, you just need a change.
I tend to agree with you. And I would not have forecasted that I would have said that a month ago. But for as good as Mark Stoops has been for this program, I agree that sometimes you can't put your finger on it, but it obviously is not yielding the results that you would hope for. He brought Kentucky football to a certain point and then plateaued, and he's not been able to break through to the next level and really has now seen a regression from 9 and 10 wins down to who knows what it's going to be this year, but 7 and 6 the last 2 years. So I would agree with you. I think there's some room for some fresh blood, some new life, a shot in the arm for Kentucky football.
Yeah, Kentucky is 2-12 now, I want to say, in the last 14 SEC home games. 0-4 in SEC home games this year. Probably going to go 1-7 in SEC games this year. because we still got to play Tennessee and Texas, and we're going to get absolutely boat raced by both of those teams. By the way, that's a primetime game next week against Tennessee, so I'm looking at a 52-3 type score. Kentucky hasn't scored 21 points against a single SEC opponent this year, Mark, not 21 points. And every time we're down 10 points, the game's over. Like, you can just feel it's completely over. We can't do anything. We got great players, but they just got raw talent, and they don't have the skill set or maturity to utilize their talent, and it's frustrating.
You are inspiring me, DeReal, to shoot a hot seat coaches video this week. And I would not have even, my mind would not have even wandered toward Lexington, Kentucky before. So I will give you certainly credit and recognition for enlightening me, just in a sense, just to open up my mind to, yes, Mark Stoops being shown the door at the end of the season, because I think that's a real possibility. And if Kentucky is taking its football seriously, and actually if they're taking the words of Mark Stoops himself seriously, who said that they're proud of what they've accomplished based on where they started, but the results of the last few years are not acceptable, and that is not enough. It's not good enough. Well, based on his own standards, stated standards, Kentucky football has not been meeting the newfound expectations that they should be shooting for. So it might be time.
I think it is time now. I'm on the Mulling for Mullen train. I listen. I want a complete character. I want some fresh blood. I want some chaotic energy. I want to be relevant, and we're not relevant as a football team, and we need somebody just to talk about us. And I think Mullen's that type of guy.
Yeah,
now, I'm sure his antics will get annoying, dressing up as Darth Vader when we're losing by 40 to Texas, but that's a problem down the road, Mark. That's not a problem for now. We just need to be relevant and people talking about us. More Kentucky fans should not be talking about their exhibition basketball game against Kentucky Wesleyan than their football game against Auburn. But that's unfortunately where we're at, Mark.
Well, it's not like you haven't experienced that many times over.
Well, I know, but it's a bad sign that we're back here this early in the season. It's not even Halloween yet.
I'm guessing that you would take a repeat of Dan Mullen's performance at Florida if you could take his exact record seasons and put them on Kentucky over the next 4 years. You would take that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I would love to be in a New Year's Six Bowl. That's like kind of the ultimate goal for the Kentucky fans is just make a New Year's Six Bowl.
Yeah.
Doesn't even, if we could lose by 60 or 70 points, just be there, have the pageantry, just say you did it for once in your life. That's our goal.
Yeah. He went to 3 in a row.
Yeah, that would be nice. I don't even know what a bowl game is going to be this season, Mark. I'm not even going to understand it when you're talking about bowl season, because we're not making a bowl this season. So you're going to have to educate me on that type of things. But Mark, there's other games that people care about more than Kentucky football. Oregon, are they really good, or is Illinois kind of a fraudulent team?
I'm going to cop out and say both, because Illinois on occasion can play tough if they are lined up against the right opponent. Penn State's not the kind of team, even for as good as they are, and I think Penn State is legitimately a top 10 team in the country, that we've witnessed this week after week after week. They're not blowing anyone out. They're not blowing anyone not named Kent State out. They just have become that kind of team, or this particular James Franklin team is just a plotter. So them messing around with Illinois is not similar to what Oregon, of course, showed us against Illinois. So Illinois is not fraudulent. They're just a 7-5 team. They're just a mid tier Big Ten team. They're right in the middle of the conference. And Oregon did what a top 2 or 3 team in the country should do to a team that's like the 40th best team in the country. That's what they did, especially at home. And so Illinois did not show me. Now, I was hoping that Illinois would be more competitive, but they were not. I didn't see much of it. And so I'm going to say that both of these teams were who they are today.
Yeah, Illinois kind of rolled over and died early on that game, which at least they're relevant this late in the season. Mark, I watched most of the Penn State-Wisconsin game because watching Kentucky's like torture now. Penn State, I noticed, looked better when Drew Aller wasn't in the game than when he was in the game. Now, I don't think their backup quarterback's better at passing the football, but I believe he adds a new wrinkle with his running game that teams aren't going to be accounting for. And I think Penn State's going to be more of a dynamic and explosive offense with him in there. So I believe there could be a quarterback competition brewing in Penn State. What do you think?
Well, even before this game, they actually used him on more than occasion. He was a regular function of the offense from week to week. They would pull out Drew Aller and they would insert Bo Prabula, and they would insert him to run the ball and run around. And we never got to see him throw the ball much, but he's been a red zone kind of threat guy or a short yardage guy for Penn State. But he had to throw the ball a little bit tonight and did reasonably well in short range. Didn't make any difficult throws. I know he threw one downfield. I saw it wasn't a very good pass. But I don't think that there's a quarterback controversy. I think if Drew Aller's ready to play and healthy enough next week, he will be in the lineup.
I got you. But I think the game would have been closer with Drew Aller today than it was with their current guy. I mean, he really showed me something, especially in that fourth quarter, that I just don't think Drew Aller has. I mean, Drew Aller's fine. He's okay, but I think he's a bit overstated.
Okay.
And I think he's a better pro prospect as well, but this is unfortunately a college game.
I understand your take. I totally get it, because if one guy can run and presents that threat to the defense, then the other guy better be a enormously more talented and skillful thrower of the ball, because he doesn't present that to the defense and he makes it much easier to scheme against. And Drew Aller has not lit up the world. And when Prabula came in and played as well as he did, throwing the ball as well, not great, but making functional passes, then logic would say that if you're able to throw the ball reasonably well, plus you're a dynamic runner versus a guy that's, I don't want to call him a statue because he can move around and run, that is a huge advantage. But I still think Drew Aller is the guy. And there's a difference between us determining who could be the bigger threat to a defense versus what James Franklin's going to do.
That's fair, and as I saw Hummus Hero put in the chat, they may not have been fully prepared for the backup quarterback of Penn State.
Yeah, look at the LSU-Texas A&M game. That was a perfect example of that.
Right. LSU also imploded. I don't think Texas A&M won that game. I think LSU lost that game. That third quarter was all nuclear meltdown levels of stuff. Garrett Nussmeier had some very bad throws. The holder not even looking for the football. Just horrendous play by LSU. But that's going to set up a great game next week, Mark, because it's Alabama-LSU a playoff game now, effectively, since they're both got 2 losses.
Bingo. So, Daryl, this is exactly what you and I have talked about in particular, and I have with other people, when the narrative of too many playoff spots going to minimize the importance of the games, and there can be a lot of teams that can slide into the playoff and play meaningless games down the stretch and lose a game or two. But this is the game right here that now becomes a playoff game during the season, as opposed to this just being, this is Alabama LSU. And if you want to watch the SEC and you want to watch 2 teams that are normally in the thick of things, but they're not this season and they're decent teams, then you just watch the game. But it really means nothing at this point in the season because they're both 6-2. that's the past. That is the 14 playoff. And what this game would have meant was nothing. Now it becomes everything. These are the games, and I'm glad you identified this one, because I, in theory, hypothetically would throw out these kind of matchups during the offseason to say these are the kind of games in late October, early November that we're going to see that were meaningless before. Now they mean everything. And this is the first one on the table.
Would you say, Mark, that it means more? Could you possibly say that it means more?
Well, if I don't say it, you're going to say it. So
I'm just throwing that out there. By the way, 3 SEC games have had over 10 million viewerships this year. Big Ten, 0. Some other games that I want to talk about is BYU.
There's a few on the slate. One might be coming this week.
Maybe. I don't think it'll do better than Ohio State, Oregon, because Penn State is, that team that just does exactly what they're supposed to do, which is beat everybody except the really elite teams every single year. So,
what are the 3 SEC games that went over 10 million views?
Georgia, Bama, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, Tennessee.
Okay. And Ohio State, Oregon did what?
9.91 million.
Okay.
Which is just under 10 million. So it's unfortunate, Mark, but that's some way the cookie crumbles. I mean, we can't always complain and cry about certain things. I mean, I know as an Ohio State fan, your fan base likes to do that. And sometimes the league office will change rules because your fan base cries about certain things. So, but, as some of us SEC fans, we just stick with the results that happen on the field, and we can't cry about that. Some other games I'll talk about is SMU. I don't know how much of SMU Duke you watched at all, but it was a great ending. SMU had the football, quarterback fumbled it because I don't think they're a good football team. Duke had a 30-yard field goal. It was blocked at the gun by SMU. They picked it up, scored, I think, on the first play of overtime. Duke scored on their first play of overtime. Duke went for 2 and didn't convert it.
I didn't really know which way to root in this game. The way the game played out and ended fit perfectly into my prediction, because I predicted SMU to win the game, but Duke plus the 11.5 points. So I got it right on both occasions. However, anytime you throw a Duke, Rutgers, fill in the blank, and they can actually late in the season be playing games that we have to somewhat pay attention to because they're in the conference race. I love that. I like that. I wanted Duke to be a factor in the race. And of course, they only had 1 loss going into this game. And now they've been taken off the board to a certain extent because there's no way Miami's losing 2, Clemson losing 2, etc., and SMU. But the reason I didn't know which way to root is because also this falls in line with a scenario I've proposed a number of times. SMU continues to win. They're undefeated in the conference, as is Miami and Clemson. I want to see all 3 of these teams go undefeated in the conference, and this cockamamie situation with these conferences being overinflated with too many teams causing a team that is undefeated to miss the conference championship game. That's what I want to see.
Well, you've got a big game next week with the SMU versus Pittsburgh, and with the way Pittsburgh has looked throughout the season, I think Pittsburgh should win that game. I know Pittsburgh's undefeated, but they do play Clemson and Miami.
No.
So
they play Clemson.
Okay. So it would be impossible if Pittsburgh wins for there to be 3 undefeated ACC teams.
We need SMU to win that game for that scenario to play out.
Right. I don't know who's favored in that game because I don't care. Next game I'll talk to you about is Kansas versus Kansas State. Mark, Jalen Daniels, so I get those players confused because they got basically the exact same name, fumbled it multiple times in the fourth quarter to blow a lead and to cost them the game. Daniels' turnover problem hasn't been fixed at all. But does this tell us more about how bad Kansas State is or how competitive the Big 12 is? That this game was this close?
Well, it tells us that this is a fun conference And if you want to watch wacky football games among teams that have no chance of winning a national championship, then this is your conference to watch. And it's fun. I like it. Just about everyone can compete against just about everyone. Had you said a month ago that Houston would beat Utah, that would be about the most outrageous game result that you could come up with in this conference, but it just happened tonight. So that's a rivalry game. Kansas State, I think, is substantially a better team, but on a given night, of course, Kansas was able to stay in the game. And as you described it to me, I only saw like 3 plays of the game. There was a break in the Penn State-Wisconsin game, and I was watching Penn State-Wisconsin on one screen, and I was watching Texas A&M LSU on the other screen, and those were my 2 choices, with Michigan State as a third selection that I did not see any of that game except about 3 plays. And you're letting me know that Kansas kind of squandered away the game, or Jalen Daniels did. But this is what we get. Look across college football, the amount of games that are unpredictable and are fun because lesser teams, or what we deem to be lesser teams, rise up on occasion, and other teams, these are 18 to 20-year-old kids playing football. So we shouldn't be surprised by anything.
Right. Now, I know that with that being said, I'm going to project one of the Big 12 teams, and that's BYU. I mean, just looking at their schedule, they play at Utah, Kansas, at Arizona State, and versus Houston. Can't imagine any of those games except Arizona State being close, because the other 3 are woefully terrible, Mark. I mean, those are legitimately terrible teams they've got to play. And even with one loss, you would figure BYU would be in the Big 12 title game.
Yes. Agreed. So we're going to see a BYU, and I believe Kansas State and Iowa State play the final game of the season. So that will most likely determine the other spot.
Yeah, and I'm just making sure this is the case. Even if BYU goes undefeated and loses to Iowa State or Kansas State, and they're 12-1, they shouldn't be in the playoffs. But would they get in the playoffs?
So there's going to be a comparison that the committee's going to have to make between 12-1 BYU and 10-2 insert SEC or Big Ten team. That is going to be the decision they're going to have to make. I, like you, believe that the 10-2 SEC and Big Ten teams have played much substantial schedules compared to BYU and should be in the CFP. I don't know what the committee's going to give us a huge hint when we see the first rankings unveiled.
Shoot, if you want to just go all the weight marks and go full homers, let's put a 9-3 like Alabama type team in there that has a substantially better win in Georgia than anything possibly BYU can do, or a 3-loss Texas A&M team.
I know you would like that.
I would, because I believe if we're going to have 12 teams, they might as well all have a chance to win the national championship. I mean, we've already got enough dead weight, as I like to put in the college football playoff, with Boise State or Army, and then whoever wins this conference, Power 4 conference. I mean, did you see that Boise State game? I mean, that's probably the most relevant game of the weekend, was that Boise State UNLV game. I mean, they won by 5 against UNLV, Mark. UNLV's not a powerhouse.
No, it's not pretty. You see a lot of plays in these group of 5 games that you would never see in the Power 5. You see a lot of missed throws, dropped. Not that you don't see dropped passes, but it's just a very evident, huge, enormous gap between the level of play. And you just know that you're not watching many future NFL players when you're watching a Boise State take on UNLV.
I got you, Mark. And only thing I'll say is, can you put George on? He's been waiting patiently for an hour, and I'll get going. And I want to say congrats to his Florida Gators for being relevant and actually probably going to go bowling this year.
That could be. All right, DeReal, thank you for being here. Let's get to Adam's comment. Adam, thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. We appreciate everyone's involvement here at the Voice of College Football and what appears to be a pretty active chat. And if you would like for me to answer your question or respond in any way, you've got the Super Chat available right there. Adam writes, Mark, I feel like the refs screwed Navy and have screwed Florida State. Just kidding. Seriously, do you think schools IQ test recruits like the NFL does? I'm becoming convinced that IQ separates the good from the elite. I have never heard of that. And I've heard, not being a recruiting guy, but certainly doing what I do, I have heard all sorts about what gets checked in recruiting visits in terms of meeting with teachers, counselors, administrators, looking at files, looking at tests. Students don't have to take IQ tests, so I doubt if they take IQ tests for schools. Or Stanford would get the best recruits, I guess. But thank you for the comment there. All right, let's keep it rolling. We're going to take these calls in order. We've got Michael on the line next. Michael, what's going on tonight?
Hey, Mark, how you doing, sir?
I am doing great. What's going on?
But I'm just going to tell you, man. I don't know. You probably didn't watch much of the IU game today, but I got to ask you this. What happened last week? Nebraska gets throttled by 49. And they was in a dogfight where they could have won. Should have won the game today against Ohio State.
Well, the only way we can explain this is that we've got 18 to 21-year-olds playing football, and they show up a bit different every week, and there are different schemes and different matchups that are either favorable to one side or not the other side. And this happens every year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
people try to paint the particular season to be crazy, and it's not. It's not that crazy. It's really not.
True.
I could go from season to season and outline similar situations where top teams have struggled with lesser teams and so forth and so on.
True. And would you say right now, even though Oregon's probably the class of the conference, but would you say Indiana's maybe a close second in the Big Ten? Or would you still put Ohio State, Penn State over them?
If we're going to go by the results, I would say Indiana's number 2.
Okay.
If we're going to go by talent and projection, I still expect Ohio State to beat Indiana.
So you really think that it's going to be a double-digit spread when they go to Columbus on November 23rd? I think that might be single digits.
Yeah,
but we still got a month to go, though. So
yeah, we've got a month to go, and you would have to tell me what's going to happen between now and then for me to better forecast what the point spread's going to be. But if they played this week, it would still be double digits.
Based on what?
Based on what?
Based on what the factor of the talent.
Because Vegas doesn't overreact to one game.
Okay.
They never have.
Yeah, but they've been pretty wrong about IU all season.
Yeah, so maybe they'd be wrong again, and they'd make them a 17-point underdog.
Yeah, true.
I'm not telling you who would win the game. I'm telling you what the point spread would be.
Mm-hmm. But, I mean, like, would you be surprised if they went into Columbus and beat them?
Would I be surprised? Mildly. Not much. Indiana's playing better right now. But again, when we say who's playing better right now, we're responding to one game. It's not like a baseball season where if you said who's playing better right now, this team or that team, and we'd look at the last week and say, oh, well, they're 6-1. They won 6 out of the last 7 this week, but they've lost 4 of 7. When people are looking at college football teams and talking about who's playing better right now, it's based on just what happened today, what happened the last game. The game before, Ohio State played the number 1 team in the country and could have kicked the game-winning field goal. So
yeah,
Yeah, Ohio State played a lousy game today. And if they play like that against Indiana on November 23rd, they will most likely lose the game.
Or next week in Penn State.
And absolutely, they'll really lose that game against Penn
No.
State if they play like they did today.
Now, did Alar get hurt tonight? Or did he get benched?
He got hurt.
Oh, because I heard you guys talk about something about how he was kind of bad and stuff, but I'm not sure what happened. I didn't see the game, so.
He wasn't bad. He was fine. He had a brace on his left knee.
Okay, hopefully it's not serious. But I think as far as with IU and stuff like that, I think work will be back next week and stuff like that when they go to or they got Michigan State, but I'm not sure if it's their bye week or if they play. But anyway, I do like their chances against Michigan State though the next 2 weeks though. But we'll see what happens though.
Yeah, I hope Rourke is able to play because I don't want to see their chances diminished at all. I want to see them at full strength or as close to full strength because obviously everybody has to endure injuries. It is football, but I want to see them as close to full strength as possible. I don't want to have to question, man, Indiana could have done something special this year, but they lost their quarterback and he wasn't able to play. So I was glad to see them survive today. More than survive. They were, I guess, impressive. I didn't see the game, but they won by 2 touchdowns. They had a substantial lead the entire game. And Taven Jackson, again, he's not the typical backup quarterback. He has been the starter.
Yeah. My thing is, though, and I don't know if, like I said, you haven't seen IU much, but it seems like the time I've seen him, the longer the game goes, the stronger IU gets, especially in the second half.
That's true. I saw them play UCLA. I saw most of that game. I saw about close to a quarter against Nebraska. And I can't say that I saw too much of any other game, maybe a few plays against Maryland.
But like I said, stuff like that was moving on, stuff like that. Big win for Michigan tonight. Or much needed win for Michigan.
A much needed win for Michigan. In terms of a big win, it's always a big win when you beat your rival. And maybe some Michigan fans aren't necessarily too happy that they won the game. Maybe they want Sharon Moore to be shown the door. Yeah. And if he's able to rally and finish, let's say 8-4, then he may stick around. But they've lost 3 games. I think they've got Oregon next week, right?
I think so.
Okay, they've got Oregon next week. That'll be mighty interesting.
But I'll say this, so Oregon's, like I said, Dorito said something about Illinois being fraud. I don't think they're really frauds. I think they're maybe a middle of the pack team and stuff like that. But the way Oregon's looked the last 2 weeks, this is the team that everybody's expecting them to play this year, or how they're supposed to be this year with the last 2 performances they've had. The shutout with Purdue, and then how they smacked Illinois today, 38-9.
Yeah, Oregon's on a roll. They have the quarterback who's playing the best in the Big Ten. They have the best or close to the best wide receiver core. They have a much superior offensive line right now to Ohio State, at least. And their defense is fast. And they are playing with all sorts of confidence. And whatever issues they had early in the season, they have fixed.
Yeah. Now, you said they got the best quarterback. How close is Rourke behind Raiola? I mean, not Raiola, but Gabriel, in your opinion?
Well, I just told you how much I've seen Rourke play, which is not much. I've seen Gabriel play a lot during his entire career. Now he benefits from playing in that offense. And even though Indiana's got a great thing going on their offense, it doesn't match up to Oregon's offense quite. I think that there are 5 or 6 really good quarterbacks in the Big Ten, and there's not much separation between them. And the only separation is based on the teams that they play. But if you would pull them off those teams, that Dylan Gabriel, Drew Aller, Miller Moss, Curtis Rourke,
Raiola, maybe?
No.
Will Howard?
Someday. Will Howard, yes. I'd put those 5 or 6 guys all in the same bucket.
Mhm.
Now, Raiola may someday be a great quarterback. I heard Gus Johnson say a number of times today that he's definitely going to be this all-time great quarterback. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Pump the brakes there, guys. Pump the
But
brakes, my friend.
exactly. He's an extremely talented player, was ranked the number 1 quarterback coming out of high school, but he's only played 6 or 7 games in college, and he has not played real well when it's been meaningful.
Mm-hmm. No, I can see why Ohio State fans wasn't happy with Kyle McCord with his performance on Friday night.
Well, Kyle McCord never threw 5 interceptions at Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Or
even
had
know if
3
he ever
pick
threw
six.
2.
Yeah, or threw in 3 pick sixes in the game. But anyway, I digress. But no, I was just wondering stuff like that. And I don't know if you remember, but do you remember much about Tim Clifford, who was the 1979 Big Ten Player of the Year?
Oh, yeah, from Indiana. Sure.
Yeah, my condolences to the IU family, to him for his passing this week.
Oh, I did not hear that. That's too bad.
Yeah, he died on Wednesday from a heart attack. But no, I was just wondering, because they honored the 1979 Holiday Bowl team during the game today at IU.
Under the circumstances, I will not poke any fun at Indiana honoring a Holiday Bowl team because it is Indiana football, and they did just have a passing of their quarterback. So otherwise, I may have a little fun with that.
Yeah, but no, how good? I mean, I can't really remember him and stuff like. I don't know how much you remember of Tim Clifford though.
Well, I remember that team. That was 1979. So that was Lee Corso, and that was also they beat Navy, correct?
Yeah.
In the Holiday Bowl.
No, BYU on a Hail
Oh,
Mary.
they beat Navy the year before, 78, right?
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
they beat BYU like 38
yeah,
to 37, something like
yeah.
that.
When Jim McMahon was at BYU.
Yep.
But no, I was just wondering because I didn't know, because I knew Mark Herman was there with him and stuff like that. But I wondered what gave the edge to Clifford over Herman that year.
I was watching the game on Raycom Sports. I can guarantee that.
Mm-hmm. Was Howard David calling the game? I wonder.
I don't know.
No, I was just wondering stuff like that and stuff like that. But no, so do you think it's a 2-team race in the So I'm trying to remember because I won't make it much longer. Does Iowa State play BYU this year?
That's a great question. I don't believe we can check on that right now. I know that Iowa State and Kansas State play the final game of the season, but Iowa State, unfortunately, does not play BYU.
Okay. How are they going to do if they all fit? Now, does K State play BYU?
K-State already lost to BYU.
Okay, so they would have the time. They get the tiebreaker over them and stuff like that. But my thing I'm trying to figure out is how is that going to happen with the ACC? Because obviously either SMU or Pitt's going to have a loss because don't either one of them still play Miami or Clemson?
Between who and who?
SMU and Pitt.
SMU does not play either one of them. Pitt plays Clemson.
Okay. So what will happen if there's a 3-way tie? They go by the rankings?
No. So if there's a 3-way tie, they go by common opponents, which if they're all undefeated, they're going to have the same record against common opponents.
Mm-hmm.
Then they go by I've got 2 things floating in my head. One is that I've seen, and we will have to reference this at some point, but they go by who has the best win in the conference, meaning if you look at each team's best win and you go through the conference finishes, who beat the best team.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe before they get to that, they go by who has the best, second best, and third best common opponents, or I'm sorry, not common opponents, but conference record. meaning who played the toughest schedule and who played the worst schedule.
Okay.
In the
So
conference,
basically strength of schedule,
which is a stupid way to determine it because those teams did not get to choose their schedule.
Not bad. All right, sir. Thanks for taking my call, and I will catch you in a few short hours for your Sunday morning show.
Thank you, Michael.
All right,
Appreciate
have
it.
a
Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
All right. We will keep it going here at the Voice of College Football. We got Defiant on the line.
Mark, how are you?
I am doing just fine. What's going on tonight?
Nothing, Mark. It's crazy because I want to talk about Signetti for a second and why he wouldn't leave. Signetti's a winner. He proves it everywhere he's been, and I feel like he wants to build Indiana to be competitive. I don't think he would be the type of coach that leaves after one season. I mean, you see what happened at JMU. You see what he did at Elon. You see what he did at Division II level. This man's a winner, and I think, again, Indiana has the money, especially from basketball, to pay the man more. And I don't think he has a lot of pressure right now to win in Indiana because historically, we haven't been a decent football team. I think if he went somewhere else like a Florida or somewhere that has history, I think he would struggle under pressure a little bit.
So there's not necessarily anything you just stated that could not be true, but we just don't know. Why do you think that he would fail under pressure? What is giving us any indication of that?
I don't know, but I also think, again, Indiana's not a job that has a lot of pressure with it. JMU at the FCS level didn't really have a lot of pressure to it. So I don't think he would really be able to, I don't know, in an SEC type of environment where you're at Florida, where you expected to win, be decent every year, compared to Indiana where, you know, we're fine going to 6-7 and 7-6 every year. You know, maybe make a bowl game once in a while, maybe a decent bowl game once in a while. I just don't think he's ready for that yet if he leaves after this year.
Well, again, you may be correct or you may not be correct. Did Urban Meyer coach at a place where there was pressure to win before he went to Florida?
No.
So all I'm saying is you may be right. You may not be right. We have no idea what anyone's tolerance for pressure is. If you get into college head coaching and you're coaching in the Big Ten, I would hope that you are prepared to coach under pressure.
Well, I think that's to some extent. I think it also too depends on the program and the history and what they have been able to do in the last couple of years leading up to a hire.
I think it actually, and we will never determine who's right and who's not right. And most likely you're partially right and partially wrong, and I'm partially right and partially wrong. But I think people are more, I think that the answer lies more in the person than in the job. That there are people who are better conditioned to handle pressure or not handle pressure. There are people that could be leading a military attack or missions of great stakes that don't feel the pressure. And then you could have a guy that is assigned to coach the recreational flag football team that feels pressure. So I think it's more about the person than it is the assumed or imagined pressure.
And I'm not going to say you're wrong. I'm not going to say like, oh yeah, that's not part of it or anything. I definitely do agree that's, you know, part of the you know, the whole being a college head football coach of a college is, you know, you have the pressures onto you than really the job. But I just think, you know, that's also a factor as well. The job you're getting yourself into as well, and having the stress of, you know, trying to, you know, live up to the value that you bring to a certain program. And again, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying I'm wrong. You know, we both have, you know, our different opinions about it.
Yep.
And then I want to get into Mike Elko a little bit. I know A&M is undefeated in conference play since 1998. Does this prove kind of that Elko is kind of so far proven to be a better head coach than Sumlin and Fisher, at least in like their first year?
Well, I don't know if it's proven it beyond a shadow of a doubt, but it is pretty close to proving it. Yes, I think he's a better coach.
Because again, the talent A&M had under Sumlin and Fisher, compared to what Elko has in his first year, it's kind of, I guess you could kind of compare it, but the type of coaching that Fisher was, coming from Florida State, you'd think Fisher would at least have a season that he was at least 5-0, 6-0 conference play to start out with, and then maybe sputter down the way. And then Sumlin in that first year with Manziel, I really thought that team was decent enough to go undefeated so far in conference play. But again, I think Elko is just proving kind of so far that, he came from Duke, he won at Duke, and then the talent that he has right now is different, is unique. His coaching style, I would say, is really unique too as well.
Yeah, the guy's an excellent football coach. I said it all off season that I considered him to be the best hire of the off season. And I wasn't making any kind of bold statement by saying that. He did a remarkable job at Duke. I think all you have to do is look at what Duke football was before he got there, and especially his first team. He had no room to recruit, and even the recruiting class that he brought in right after he got the job was obviously not his class and could only have so much impact as true freshmen. And for a coach to take over a team that had lost, I think, 16 of 17 games in conference play and turn them into a 9-4 team that never lost a game by more than one score, that shows you right there. When somebody can come in, it's like the old adage, and I can't repeat it. The old adage that he can take his and beat yours, and he can also take yours and beat his. I think it goes something like that, and he's one of those guys.
And I think, again, ties back into Cignetti. What Cignetti's doing right now is first year in Indiana. He took the guys from last year, and I know, again, he has transfers from JMU and, Curtis coming from Ohio, but the way he's been improving this roster in just a, short span of time is really impressive. I think Elko is doing the same thing with the guys that Fisher has recruited, and then some guys he has brought in as well. But again, it's really impressive for an SEC team.
And again, also some people would be surprised how many people on that roster he recruited.
Oh, I definitely agree. And again,
meaning when he was the defensive coordinator there, he recruited them.
And again, give Elko time now as the head coach at A&M. He's going to definitely bring in the guys he wants to bring in, and that would want to win in A&M. And then just give him time. You'll have him competing maybe for national championship in a couple years, whatsoever. Maybe just making it. But again, Elko again, it's really improved. I'm like, okay, he was at Duke. Duke is playing the ACC. They're not really. That's not really a top-heavy conference, or really a decent conference compared to the SEC. And now seeing what he can do again against LSU and all these teams, it's really just been impressive what he has done so far. And he's probably the top 2 head coaches right now in the first year that's really been good and improved their teams so far.
No doubt.
And then lastly, I guess I'll just talk about the ACC again. Who do you think needs to win next week between SMU and Pittsburgh? Who do you think needs to win more out of those two?
Well, they both need to win.
But who could lose this game?
They have the same record, basically. SMU's played more games in the conference. We're looking at it right now. Let's see, SMU's 4-0 and Pitt's 3-0. The only determination to make between those two teams would be that SMU needs to win slightly more because they don't get to see Clemson or Miami. Pitt gets to see Clemson. So they can knock out Clemson by winning their games and beating Clemson head-to-head. SMU does not get that opportunity. Therefore, this game's more important to SMU.
I would say SMU needs it again to be undefeated and potentially see what happens in terms of the playoff implications. because that BYU loss is looking better and better for SMU if they can win out and be undefeated in the ACC and then have BYU be 12-1, potentially make a playoff too. Because again, that's their only loss right now. And Pittsburgh, to me, I don't think they're as good as their record shows in terms of being 7-0. I know they beat Syracuse on Thursday or whatever, but they just blew them out. They just got the turnovers they needed, and I don't think Pittsburgh, again, really isn't that good of a team compared to like a SMU.
Well, I would be surprised if that's not a close game. When you say that SMU is much better than Pitt, SMU needed overtime to beat Duke tonight. SMU really isn't blowing anyone out that's not named Florida State. I think that both of those teams are top 30 teams in the country.
Oh, I'm not saying SMU is this world beater. I'm just thinking SMU has a little bit slight of an edge over Pittsburgh. That's all I'm saying in terms of what they've been doing so far. And that they have a loss to a top 12 team currently right now.
Gotcha. And Pitt doesn't have a loss to a top 12 team.
No.
Although
but again,
BYU really isn't a top 12 team.
No, they aren't. But again, I haven't looked at what Pitt's non-conference schedule was and SMU's non-conference schedule besides that BYU game. To really factor in who has a slighter edge over the other.
Well, SMU played the much more difficult game because they played BYU.
Mm-hmm.
Pitt intended on scheduling tougher. They played Cincinnati and West Virginia. Yeah, I don't think there's much separation between those two teams. SMU's winning close games. Pitt's winning close games against marginal opponents. And unfortunately, we will not get to see them play.
Yeah, until again next week when these two teams have to win in order to keep that title hopes in check there.
Yeah, and the only distinction I'm making to your question is that Pitt gets to play Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't need this game quite as much.
No, because it can be a three-way tie for second place potentially. I'm assuming Miami's going to win out no matter what. Because Miami's just, I don't know who Miami plays in the next 4 games, but you could see a three-way tie for second place if SMU beats Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh beats Clemson. They'll all have one loss in the conference.
Yep.
So yeah. Again, SMU might need it more just because to keep their playoff hopes potentially. Pittsburgh as well. I don't know how slim their hopes are to make it. But we'll see. We'll see.
All right, Defiant. Anything else?
No, Mark, that was it.
Well, I appreciate you calling.
Thank you, Mark.
Have a good night. Thanks. All right, looks like we've got one more call on the board. We got the Michigan man stopping by.
Hey, how you doing, Mark?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I was torn today, man. Of course, I always want to beat Michigan State, but at the same time, I don't want to keep this coaching staff. So,
well, that's what I just said to somebody else a few minutes ago.
Oh, well, there you go. Because I'm caught in a hard place here. Because I want Kurt Signetti, man. I want Kurt Signetti. Ohio State, be honest with you, they might try to get Kurt Signetti with the way it's looking over there too. I'm just gonna throw that out there, but we'll see. What were your thoughts on the game today? I thought, to me, what today really spoke to with the Michigan game was, I think they should have stuck with Davis Warren probably the whole time.
Well, I got to say, I didn't see that much of the game. I was watching Penn State, Wisconsin, and LSU and Texas A&M, but I saw the first couple drives where Michigan State went all the way down the field, missed a field goal, and then they had another great drive, took the lead. So the first, half a quarter, it looked like Michigan State, was looking great and moving the ball. And then I saw, Michigan started to get a little bit creative on offense, and they shot themselves in the foot a little bit, but at least they were trying to do something different. Some of those plays worked, but they did some crazy stuff where they had like a 3rd and 5, and they ran a kind of a weird looking jet sweep with Donovan Edwards, and They got their best player involved, which was good. Colston Loveland seemed like they were intentionally trying to get him the ball. But yeah, if Davis Warren, if this quarterback competition leading into week 1 went as we have to think that it played out based on the decisions that were made. Number one, that they couldn't make a decision until very late in camp. And then number 2, turned out to be Davis Warren. Well, then he evidently was the best quarterback that they had. And we know he's a better passer than Orgy. So they basically decided that, look at that Arkansas State game that got him benched. That was the game where he did not throw an incompletion except for throwing 3 interceptions. That they decided that they couldn't develop and coach him and try to coach him out of those 1 to 3 mistakes a game, because otherwise he's a better option.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, to me, that shows kind of the inexperience of Sharon Moore. Because I feel Jim Harbaugh would have kept him starting, personally. I think Jim Harbaugh would have kept Davis Warren and try to work through that. And I think Sharon Moore, being the inexperienced coach he is, kind of panicked a little and swapped, because he's by far and away the best passer in terms of accuracy and arm strength. He's better than Orgy. He's way better than Tuttle. I actually think Tuttle's the worst thrower of the football out of the 3. Today 13 for 19. It's nothing crazy, but compared to what we've had, you know what I'm saying? 13 for 19 for 123 yards and a touchdown. But from the 2-minute drill at the end of the second quarter, he played very well in terms of hitting passes when they needed to be hit and so on and so forth. I just kind of look back and I wish, they actually stuck with him in retrospect. And I don't think we lose to Illinois, and I think maybe we're sitting here 6-2, still not a good football team in my opinion, because I think the defense has its own issues. And we could talk about that, but the worst third down defense in the country. I mean, every time it's a 3rd and 10, it feels like they're going to give it up. It's insane. It was get this, it was 2nd and 24, right? It's late in the 4th quarter, 2nd and 24 for Michigan State. Our defense gives up like 14 yards on 2nd down, and then they convert the 3rd and 10, and then they convert another 3rd and 12, and then they end up getting a touchdown. It's the worst. Wink might be the worst hire in the country, and he's the highest paid defensive coordinator. I'm just keeping it a book. But that's just how I feel about it.
To explain, when it happens over and over and over, then and that you're looking at the same players that played on a defense that won the national championship that had the best defense, it's kind of tough to excuse that and not look at the defensive coordinator right in the eyes.
Oh, 100%. So Texas, do you think Vanderbilt's actually pretty good this year, or do you think Texas is kind of coming back down to earth, or maybe a combination of both?
Well, of course, it's some combination. The question is, how much is it a 50-50 combination? Well, probably not. More, it's that Texas, if you really look at them, who have they played? It's Georgia, and they got steamrolled, and Oklahoma is pretty awful, and Michigan's marginal, and here you go. They play this game against Vanderbilt, and I actually I didn't intend on watching this game, but I actually watched it start to finish. And Vandy was able to hang in that game, and they couldn't run the ball. The quarterback runs, Pavia. He's the runner. They couldn't run out of the running back position. And to put all of that, it's almost like LSU and Garrett Nussmeier. He has no running game to support him. They ran for like 23 yards. And so for Vanderbilt to hang in a game with Texas where they can't run the ball from the running back position is pretty impressive otherwise. And
yeah, I think they're one of the biggest surprises of the year for sure, Vanderbilt. Actually, probably the last 10 years.
Yeah. The other thing is that Texas couldn't run the ball down their throats, and they also couldn't protect Ewers that well. They did on occasion, of course, but considering Texas's offensive line is supposed to be like a top 3 offensive line in the country. Vanderbilt was harassing Ewers. They were getting in his face. They had two or three. Well, they had 2 batted balls in the air at the line of scrimmage that they picked off, and had other ones that they could have picked off. Yeah, it was interesting to watch them hang in that game. Now, they never were in a position where you thought, okay, they're about to win this game. They got the upper hand. They never had the upper hand, but they stayed in it all the way.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I gotta talk about it, Mark. What's up with Ohio State, man? Like, what's your synopsis of what's going on with them? Because I think, and maybe it's the left tackle too, but I'm gonna say a hot take here. I think that they're clearly worse defensively this year than they were last year. I don't think we can argue that anymore.
Well, they gave up 17 points today, and their offense put them in a bad spot a number of times where they could have given up points and they didn't.
Yeah, no question. I mean, like, when I say they're not as good, you gotta remember, Ohio State's defense last year was arguably what? Top 3?
Yeah.
Top 2? Arguably. I just, I've been watching them since they, got Michigan State was probably their first what was their first game after the first 3 games? Was that Michigan State?
Michigan State. Yeah.
Yeah, since the Michigan State game, I guess outside of the Iowa game, which was an outlier here, the defense to me is giving up a lot in between the 20s. They're giving up a lot of room in between the 20s, and they either get a turnover in the red zone or they hunker down there, but they don't come off as super dominant to me this year.
No, they're not.
And maybe, yeah. I don't know, man. It's just
if they were playing a good offense. Crap, I was trying to pull up the stats, and this stupid AT&T thing comes up. There we go. If they were playing a reasonable offense, not a great offense, not Oregon or somebody like that, but if they were playing, I don't know, Washington or somebody today, I would have considered that to be a really good defensive effort. But Nebraska's offense has been pretty awful. They scored a touchdown.
You got to remember,
Indiana. They scored 2 touchdowns against Rutgers and could barely move the ball. They've been awful. And Ohio State statistically turned in a decent game, but not, like you say, a dominant game.
And you got to remember, Mark, they missed 2 wide open touchdowns in this game.
Oh yeah, they did.
So it really doesn't. When you got to really watch the film, there was what was it? The wheel? I think it was like a wheel route with the tight end, wide open. Would have been a touchdown. Missed it. I mean, I don't know. Are you? I know you don't want like to put your biases out there, but I guess hypothetically, as a Ohio State fan, would you be a little worried about them right now in terms of being a championship contender?
Of course. Yeah. But I do think that if you, I hate to pin it on one guy, but if you go to the offensive side and you look at them not moving the ball, it's because the left tackle, this just happened play after play after play after play, that the left tackle got whipped time and time again, and that blew up the play. Now, one of those times I watched the next play, they decidedly shifted their protection to that side. It was like crazy how much they shifted, like 3 guys, like they all looked in that direction and they slid the protection his way. Well, you can't do that for an entire season. That's just going to be too obvious to everybody. So
yeah.
It's a huge problem that the defense isn't as dominant as it should be, and that when you can't get Quinshon Judkins 2.9 yards per carry and Travion Henderson at 2.5, that's horrible.
Yeah, I actually have a theory about that, and I think it started with the Oregon game. With Chip Kelly, they seem to be the offense seems to be a lot more horizontal versus vertical. Like the past 3 years, they attempted more vertical things, And I get why you do. I mean, that's Chip Kelly's offense. He likes to stretch you out horizontally and vertically. But it seems like to me, starting with Oregon and now this team, the defenses are really starting to come up on the line of scrimmage and focus on the horizontal game. And I think Will Howard's going to have to start, or they're going to have to really start taking the top off more to help with that. Because I think that's what's going on. I mean, that's my opinion.
Well, they did a couple times today. They took the top off and they were able to do it. They chucked a 60-yarder to Jeremiah Smith and they chucked like a 40-yarder to Carnell Tate.
Yeah.
And to further your point, when you have offensive line issues and guys can't sustain blocks, then stringing out plays from sideline to sideline and trying to stretch that way is not the way to go.
I agree. I think they need to go back to some of the more Ryan Day-centric offense, which is pretty much just kind of, a lot more vertical passing, which I don't know. Maybe you could tell me this. Is Will Howard not as good of a vertical passer as, the CJ Stroud? Well, obviously not CJ Stroud, but as even McCord is?
Yeah.
Is that part of why they're doing what they're doing with the offense?
He will take care of the ball better than Kyle McCord. And I'm not just saying that about Kyle McCord because he threw 5 picks.
Yeah, that was crazy.
But I would have said this a week ago. Kyle McCord's a better deep ball thrower than Will Howard. And so Howard isn't he's not in Justin Fields' league, and obviously CJ Stroud or Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord's better if just the ability to throw the ball deep and put velocity on it and even put it in a tight window. Kyle McCord's a more of a gunslinger, which gets him into trouble. But he's a more talented thrower than Will Howard is, in my opinion.
Well, let me ask you this: if they end up, I don't think they'll lose to Penn State. Actually, I don't think they'll lose the rest of the way, Ohio State, personally, because really their only challenge left is, actually they got Indiana. Indiana's a question mark, but Penn State. I mean, I can't trust James Franklin against Ohio State. I just can't do it until he proves me wrong, to be honest with you. But let's say he drops the game next week. Do you think it's going to start getting talked about? Because that pretty much will knock you out of even the Big Ten title game, right?
Sure.
So do you think conversations are going to start happening just because you guys have such a high standard about possibly moving on?
Well, you're not taking us out of the playoff, are you?
No, obviously. I mean, if you got 2 losses, you're still going to play. Well, okay, in my scenario, you wouldn't win it. You wouldn't win the championship.
Well,
either. I mean, you wouldn't win the Big Ten.
Yeah, it's going to come down to the playoff performance.
Okay, let's say you don't win the Big Ten championship game because you don't get in there, and let's say you lose in the playoffs. Do you think there's going to start being conversations, considering all that you brought back this year and added?
Yeah.
Do you think Signetti? Because I want Signetti. I think Signetti, everybody going to be on that phone.
Yeah, they are.
I'm just being honest. That guy is a superstar in the making.
Absolutely.
I can see Ohio State, trying to. I can see Ohio State seems to always be great at their timing when it comes to hiring coaches. They're the best ever at that when it comes to hiring coaches.
Yeah, they certainly pulled the trigger on Urban Meyer at the right time, and he fell into their lap. And Jim Tressel, yeah.
Even Ron Day, you could say to a degree, right? I mean, because. Sure. So I'm just saying, man. Look, I'm not trying to put a rainy cloud over your team, but I don't know. As a Michigan fan, we could lose the rest of our games as long as you guys don't win that chip. We good, this year. So as long as you don't one up us.
Oh, I got you. I hear.
Well, I gotta go, man. I'm rooting for Penn State. I just think James Franklin don't got it in him. He's gonna do something stupid in that game to lose the game. We all know what's gonna happen. So, all right, peace out.
Thanks, man. Michigan man dropping by. Does not mind if his team loses the rest of its games. So Ohio State does not win the national championship. And I get that because Michigan just won the Natty. Therefore, they can always hang that over Ohio State fans' heads as saying we won the last Natty. Got it. Makes sense. But yeah, shoot, Ryan Day is going to be in trouble if he loses another game. Again, it's going to come down to if they get to the playoff. If they don't get to the playoff, then he's really going to be in trouble. But if they get to the playoff and they disappoint in the playoff, let's say they are a 7 seed. Let's say they're second or third place in the Big Ten. Let's say they lose another game. They don't make the Big Ten championship game. They still make the playoff at 10-2. They're an 8 seed. And even if they win a game, then they lose the next one. Let's say they win an 8-9 matchup, but then the 8 seed's going to have to play the 1 seed. Let's say they play Georgia, Texas, whoever, Oregon in a rematch, and they lose. Yeah, that's going to be a huge disappointment. And there's going to be, I would love to hear the conversations in the boardrooms about Ryan Day's job, because you got to think that even though there will be a consensus of a front, a united front in that decision, that won't be the case. There will be much debate about it. I'm sure there will be some who will say, no, he's doing a nice job. We can't pull the trigger on this. That's ridiculous. We still have a great football program. We're still recruiting great. We got to keep this thing going. We don't want to disrupt this. We don't want to risk falling behind. We don't want to risk making a poor hire. We don't want to risk not being able to find the kind of coach that can continue this elite status. But then there are going to be others that are going to debate and say, we poured everything we could into this program and into this season in particular, and we failed miserably. And therefore, we've got to go get somebody that can show that they can get the job done. But who are those guys? Where do they exist? Who are the guys? Let's say Kirby Smart and Georgia wins the national championship this year. So he wins a 3rd national championship. Who are the coaches who have shown, who have proven that they can win the whole thing? They don't exist in college football anymore. They're not active. They're gone. Nick Saban's retired. Urban Meyer's basically retired. Dabo Swinney's at Clemson. And unlike Meyer and Saban, has never proven that he can move from job to job to job to job and turn every situation into a winner automatically. And of course, he's not had the type of seasons recently that made him an all-time great coach. Mac Brown obviously technically fits the bill as a national championship coach, but does not in a practical sense. So if you're going to fire Ryan Day to go for a sure thing, that guy doesn't exist anymore. Jim Harbaugh's off to the NFL, and Nick Saban's retired, and Urban Meyer's gone. And these are the guys that have won national championships. So that guy does not exist. He's not here. He's not anywhere except Athens, Georgia. So I made a list. This was following a conversation with Steve Dace, and it hit me, the amount of talent, because it must have been after he presented to me and I presented to him our coaches' rankings. And it dawned on me, wow, because we got to like numbers 6, 7, 8, 9 that you would consider to be tremendous coaches with basically no flaws. If you're the 6th best coach in the country, 7th, 8th. And I'm looking at these guys thinking, these guys have some serious flaws and some serious holes in their resume, but I can't find the guys beneath them that you would elevate. And then I started to think about all the coaches who have left college football in the last roughly 5 years. Think about the talent that has left college football, the coaching profession of college football in the last 5 years, roughly 5 years. Urban Meyer, Chris Peterson, David Shaw, Jimbo Fisher, Jim Harbaugh, Nick Saban. Who am I missing? There were others. I came up with a list of about 15 guys. I came up with a list of about Bill Snyder, of about 15 to 20 excellent coaches who have left the sport in the last 5 to 7 years. And then who are the great coaches that have emerged just in the last 5 to 7 years? And when I say great, I don't mean all-time great. I mean that they're among the best coaches or better coaches in the sport. In the last 5 to 7 years, the guys that have emerged would be Kalen DeBoer, Josh Heupel, I'm not going to put Kurt Signetti based on 7 games or 8 games in that category, but things look good in that direction. But I just came up with this long list of coaches that are no longer in the sport that were top of the line guys. And I don't think they've been largely replaced. Sure, there are really good coaches that have emerged to some degree. But yeah, they've not been replaced. So, and of course, Ohio State went and got Jim Tressel, and Jim Tressel was not proven at that level. Of course not. Urban Meyer was. And so even the best programs have to go out there and they have to take a small calculated risk chance. LSU and USC, of course, made huge coaching hires, getting Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley. They're excellent coaches. Have they won national championships? No. Have they been close to winning national championships? No. Making the playoff is not close to winning a national championship when your team has shown repeatedly, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma and Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, that they're nowhere close to winning a national championship, that their teams cannot compete with the best teams in the country. There are not that many coaches that you would just hire and just be like, it's done. They're good to go. He's going to get the job done. He's going to win at the highest level. No, there would be an amount of risk in hiring Kurt Signetti, or who else would be out there? If one of the very top jobs in the country opened up, I mean the very top, and under Michigan Man scenario, that would be Ohio State, that opened up. Of course, in a sense, almost anybody becomes available because almost anybody would run to that job outside of Kirby Smart at Georgia, Dabo Swinney at Clemson. Who else would not leave their job to go to Ohio State? Either because it's as good a job or because they just love it and love what they've got going at their current job. Those are the only 2 guys that I know of for sure. For sure. I'm not saying that there aren't other guys that would say, you know what, I'm good. I like what I've got going here. Maybe Mario Cristobal at Miami. But if Ohio State does not play better than it did on Saturday against Nebraska, then we will probably be in the market of talking about head coaching hires at Ohio State. As B says here, Ohio State has a lot of pressure. You lose 2 games and you're fired. And that's something that becomes very obvious in listening to Ryan Day's news conferences every week. It seems like about every other week at his weekly news conference, he will at some point when somebody mentions, and it happens more in the off season actually during his news conferences than in season, because the focus is on the next game, reviewing the previous game and focusing on the next game. But all those off-season news conferences obviously reflect on the failures of the previous season. You don't focus on the successes, you focus on the failures, because if you go 12-1, what are you going to talk about? Well, you're going to talk about the game you lost, because that cost you a chance to go win the national championship. You're going to talk about losing to Michigan. You're going to talk about losing to Georgia. That's what you're going to talk about, because those are the only games that he loses. And he mentions every time, he will make this statement, which in a sense seems ridiculous if you really take it verbatim, but it's true. He says, I know I have to win every game. I'm expected to win every game. Urban Meyer said just a few months ago that when he was hired at Ohio State, that he was handed, and he probably was on a piece of paper back in those days, 2012, by the athletic director, Gene Smith, that there were two musts, two not even goals or objectives. They were two, this has to happen. And he wrote, graduate your players, win every game. And Urban Meyer only came through with one national championship. But that said, he did almost win every game. He only lost, especially if you're looking at regular season. And then because the regular season obviously puts you in position to then play in the postseason. And if you look at Urban Meyer, he lost how many regular season games in 9 years? 7 years. I think he lost 9. No, he didn't lose that many. He lost 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 2, 1. He lost 6 regular season games in 7 years. All right, folks, we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. That wraps it up for a Saturday night show. Thanks for being here. Please use the Amazon link in the description section when you shop on Amazon, and we know you do. So please help us out here at the Voice of College Football. When you use the Amazon link, it's the same shopping experience. Does not cost you a penny. This is the one way in which you can contribute to the Voice of College Football without spending a penny. And so, that being said, I would like to thank Adam for basically funding our show tonight. So I have been on the clock here for 2 hours and 11 minutes. And Adam gave us a $30 super chat. So thank you for that. I will get about $18 of that. So thank you for that, Adam. He has sponsored the show tonight. 18. Man, I was stocking shelves when I was like 17 years old. Doing better than that, but that's fine. All right, appreciate you being here. We'll see you Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. B, I got to say thank you so much for that. And I'm glad that you caught me before I ran out the door here. So B, I apologize if for some reason I should know or recognize your account, but I don't, because I don't. So you made that earlier comment and I thought, I've never seen this guy before. I assume you're a guy. I shouldn't do that. because we've got 93% males and 7% females. That is the demographic here at the Voice of College Football. But we saw B's comment before. He made a very astute comment earlier, so I read that off. And then thank you so much for your contribution. That's very kind of you. I will also remind everyone that if you contribute at Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App at Mark Rogers TV, those are actually the most effective ways to contribute here at the Voice of College Football. And we will make sure that we recognize you here. All right. Thank you so much for that, B and Adam and everyone else. We always appreciate your support in any way that comes. Please hit the like button. That's one way right there. See you at 11 a.m. Eastern time for more college football, more wrap up of week 9 with all of you.